I'm on Bloomberg Radio. We're going to turn now to one of those trying to plow through all of this up on Capitol Hill, Democratic Congressman Sean Casten of Illinois. So, Congressman, thank you so much. I understand you came out of the Democratic caucus to talk with us. Really appreciate it. Give us a sense of what's going on in that caucus right now.
So I'm really encouraged. You know, we ran last cycle on the promise of doing all of these things, lowering prescription drug costs, dealing with the climate, building out our infrastructure, and we're going to get it done. I've always been partial to Duke Ellington's line. I don't need a goal, I need a deadline. And we made a lot of progress over the last 48 hours with respect to moving some folks along. And you know, if it takes another day, if it takes another 30 days, that's okay. I'd rather be in a position where we say before we inject a couple $1 trillion into the economy, we've sorted through all the equities, than rushing it through because of an artificially imposed deadline. But I'm confident we'll get it done.
Yeah, well said. And I will infer from that it's possible that we won't make that latest deadline from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, saying they'll vote today. Maybe yes, maybe no. At the same time, what's going to change? Because there's been a lot of negotiation already. You seem to have an impasse here. What's going to change within the caucus that will get it done?
Well, look, I think every single person in the caucus, to a person, wants to make sure that we have the infrastructure package done, that bipartisan infrastructure framework that came out of the Senate, and this broader reconciliation package, the Build Back Better Act. What I think is tricky is that the provisions in the Build Back Better Act are things that were incompatible with a bipartisan framework. It's tragic. I spent 20 years as a CEO in the energy industry. I'm as middle of the road politically as you get. But it's tragic to me that if we're prioritizing lowering drug costs, if we're prioritizing climate, we can't do that in a bipartisan framework. So really the push and pull right now is just making sure that with very thin majorities in the Senate and with essentially one entire party that has said we are not going to cooperate in this discussion, we're doing what legislators do. We're negotiating the parameters of a bill, but we're doing it with one arm tied behind our back because the Republicans have chosen not to participate. So we'll get it done, but it's a little harder when any one person may have an issue that can tank the deal.
Yeah, when it comes to the Build Back Better part, it looks like it's going to have to be the Democrats. If it gets done at all, it's going to be the Democrats pretty clearly. Give us a sense of how the Democratic caucus reacted from your sense of talking to your colleagues up there to Joe Manchin's proposal yesterday. Let's take the $3.5 trillion down to something like $1.5 trillion. Is there any appetite for that?
Well, I think what's hard and what we're finally starting to get some clarity from Manchin is that the top line number fundamentally doesn't matter because it's fully paid for. The cost of this bill to the American, as far as the actual net change in our fiscal situation is zero because it's fully paid for. The question really becomes what's the substance of the bill, and Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema prior to yesterday were really pretty unclear as far as what are the things you don't like. Do you think we should not help out, struggling children who are below the poverty line? Do you think we should kick the can down the road on climate, until maybe someone with leadership skills we lack can deal with this? We're starting to get some clarity, but I think the press points on this are really going to be the substance of the policy, as it should be, not the headline number, because the headline number will be paid for one way or the other.
Okay, so Congressman, hindsight is always 20/20, and it doesn't do much good to say what could have happened. But given what you just said, that the number doesn't matter that much, do you think that some people made a mistake by putting that number out there? Because it surely made a big bogey for the Republicans to shoot at.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you said, hindsight is 20/20. It's important to understand we have a $20 trillion economy. We're talking about $3.5 trillion over 10 years, $350 billion a year, of which is fully paid for. That's a rounding error in the economy. You could make the case for us being much stronger, but I think it's much more important that we really talk about the provisions that are in there. Again, people really like those provisions in it. And we're talking about giving people on Medicare the ability to finally have dental and vision care. That's really important to people. Extending the child tax credit, those checks that people are getting now, extending those and making them permanent. Providing a whole bunch of clean energy incentives so that we can build out transmission systems and clean energy, the clean energy power plan to make sure that we give a better planet to our kids and ones who are here from our parents. Those are really popular. Let's get those all done, and yes, let's talk more about those and not the number, which is, again, the 1 year spending from this number is a very small part of the total U.S. economy.
Tip O'Neill famously said all politics is local. I believe it was Tip O'Neill. Take us back to your home district. When you go back there and talk to your constituents, what do they make out of what's going on right now in Capitol Hill? I mean, the whole thing, the debt ceiling and the funding the government, everything else. Can they understand what's going on?
I think sometimes we get caught up in our own knickers in Washington. When you talk to people about what their real day-to-day issues are, people are concerned about COVID. It still is a top issue. People are concerned about, can we trust that this 275-year-old experiment in democracy we have is going to be robust in the wake of what happened on January 6th. Those are the issues that matter to people. Are they going to be able to know that if they get to a point in their life where all of a sudden they aren't working anymore, will they have enough money set aside to pay for their health care bills? That's what people care about. This inside baseball stuff about the process and who said what to who and what you think about Joe Manchin, I guess it makes good television, but nobody really cares outside of the Beltway.
So, Congressman, finally, I want to go back to yesterday when you asked some questions of Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen about the debt ceiling. I mean, you basically said, should we have this thing at all? And she responded in some substance, look, if you appropriate money, then why do you put it on our shoulders to figure out how to pay for it? Why are you putting us in this jam? Should we have a debt ceiling?
Absolutely not, and I'm delighted that Bill Foster has introduced this bill to eliminate the debt ceiling. And it's important for your viewers to understand, every member of Congress votes on spending packages. We may vote for, we may vote against, but the majority rules and the majority decides how we're going to spend our money. Every member of Congress votes on tax policy. So how much of the spending that we do is going to be paid for by taxpayers? The residual that remains is debt. We don't get to go back and second guess in the future, I don't want to pay for that. We don't get to go back and second guess in the future and say, hey, you taxpayers, you don't have to pay, you can just opt out of this. And we have this completely manufactured crisis in the debt ceiling where we have given Congress the ability to say, I don't want to pay the debt. That is an act of suicide to choose not to do that. It destroys the financial markets. $8 trillion of the current deficit was built up under Trump. And to now have the entire Republican Party say, yeah, I voted to add debt to the economy, but now I don't want to pay my bills. My view is that says that if you have a weapon of mass destruction and you choose to use it, you shouldn't be allowed to play in the toy box anymore.
Okay, Congressman, thank you so very much. That was really helpful. That's Congressman Sean Casten, Democrat of Illinois. Coming up here, continue.